actually pull the slides up. Just welcome everyone. I'm speaking to you from the Snoonamix First Nation unceded territory. They're under a treaty process right now, so all of this land that we are on has never been ceded. And the process right now, it sounds like they will actually end up with quite a large piece of land on Gabriola, which we're really thankful for. What I'm going to be talking to you about is really a lot of what was referenced in the last conversation, which is around grassroots conversations. I'm going to have a PowerPoint and I'll talk for probably about 15, 20 minutes. And while I'm talking, people feel free to ask questions in the chat and I can pause and we can respond to those, or just blurt out if you have a really strong question that you want to ask. Okay, I am going to try to do the share screen now. This is always the test, right? And Brandon, you're there. Okay. I think we managed to do it. Slideshow and play from start. Okay, so our climate change initiative it's about local impacts, it's local solutions. It was a team of Gabriolans that were having a conversation. We are all part of the Sustainable Gabriola kind of monthly conversations, and someone said we need to have conversations on the island, information about climate change, because there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of smoke from forest fires around us. There's a fear around the water rising. There's a real fear that there is nothing we can do, and people are disheartened, they're depressed. And let's find some way of engaging the community and turning it into something where people feel like they're part of the change going forward. So what we held is a number of different things. One of them was a monthly cafe. We also held tours that related to the specific topic, as well as held some other kinds of special events. So Climate 12-12-12 refers to 12 months, 12 wicked problems related to climate change, and 12 and many, many more solutions. So we held it at a local cafe, one that actually won an award around circular economy, and is very, really good at kind of working with the community in order to make these kinds of events happen. So the monthly cafes, what were they all about? We did hold them in the evening, and the topics, the 12 topics that we talked about, I'm going to walk through these because they're actually kind of hard to read on this paper, but this was something that we had up at our fall fair, and people got to put dots on the various things they felt were important. And just to give you a sense too, Gabriola has got 4,500 people approximately. And we are off the coast of the central part of Vancouver Island. So past the Victoria area, past the southern Gulf Islands, and heading towards the northern Gulf Islands. We're the kind of island in between. So the different topics we covered included agriculture, included indigenous ways of knowing, included consumerism and waste, economic change, arts and culture, transportation, building and energy, water, health, ecological, biodiversity. So we covered a large range of areas. What we started each evening with was a Snoonamix land acknowledgement. What you see there is the Elder Cedar, which is the land that they will be owning once the treaties are settled. What we then did, we had a cultural start, because for us, this was also about fun. We wanted people to engage, to enjoy to have conversations with their neighbors. This is a really serious topic, and people need to feel like there's something positive going forward. So I love the whole concept of regeneration that this tour and the Regeneration Cascadia has brought forward, because there are a number of people on Gabriola that may have used that word, but it is much more about kind of moving forward and the energy around that. And I think that's the kind of energy that we were trying to get at in this particular initiative. And just as a backdrop, because in the last conversation there were conversations around bringing in professionals and doing it top down. And this was exactly the opposite. This is people in the community. We reached out, we got a little bit of funding. I think we had a total of $3,000 just to be able to pay for the space, for ads, etc. So what we started the evening with was a number of different ways of kind of engaging people in a cultural way. The woman on the right, amazing singer. We have an amazing amount of musicians and artists on the island. And so the cultural start always started with something that was related to the topic. So the very first topic we did was around our ecosystems. And so she sang about this idea of who are humans in this landscape and who do we think we are versus this massive, beautiful ecosystem that we are surrounded with, and the extent to which we sometimes don't really get that we are just one part of. And so she started the evening with that. The power of story. We had the wife of the woman who wrote this was part of our team. And so for the Economic Change Initiative, she read something from his book, which talked about how we need to change the whole story of what is economics and recognize that it needs to serve the land, it needs to serve us, and it should not be about serving itself, which is really, I think that many of the current systems are like that. So how do we switch that? How do we change that? And the one up top when we did buildings, we had a little puppet show put on by some people, which was about the three little pigs. So the success story was the next thing. We felt it was really important that people heard the positive things. We are already doing things on the island. There are things that are successful.
This is something Gabriola.
What's that?
I'm sorry, I just had it off mute by mistake, telling my partner this is Gabriola. I'm going on mute. Apologies.
Okay. I thought that's an interesting question. Yeah, this is on Gabriola. So the success stories. So some of the ones we talked about, the Fix It Fair, which is down in the bottom left of the screen, is something that we hold 3 times a year. People bring it's free. The fixers are all volunteers. They bring their whatever is broken, and they sit there and often learn how do you fix it? How do you fix it next time? So instead of having a kind of throwaway culture, we start to shift towards one that's really repairing, keeping the things that we own, figuring out how to use them and how to keep them. Then the one above that, there's a group on the island that provides residents with support around turning their home into a wildlife-friendly garden, or turning it or stewarding it in a much deeper way. We had it here at my place. They walk you through your whole property. We have about 8 acres, and they tell you where it is that you can kind of initiate more natural plantings. How do you allow for those natural plantings to be kind of nurtured and supported? And what are ways you can do that? Because the majority of the island land, and I would think this is true of most places, is privately owned. We do have some protected area. It's about 1/10, And we are hoping to have more protected areas. But in the meantime, those people who have property, there is an opportunity to actually conserve, to turn it back, to regenerate your own land. The thing in the picture in the middle called We Love Local, we initiated something on our island where we have a thrift store, a recycling depot, but inside part of that is when people bring all their clothes that they aren't using anymore, they go in and people can buy that stuff that they want to buy, but there's about 50% of it that never gets purchased. So that was then going off and off to shipped overseas to Matumba markets, and eventually much of that went into the landfill. So what we did is we said, no, we're committed to keeping it all here and let's turn it into other products. So there's a lot of upcycling products, but there's everything cloths to replace paper towels, there's tote bags, and we're shredding a lot of the polyester and we're going to try and use it in acoustic sound panels. So really trying to not think about extracting any more resources, but instead recognize we've got stuff right in the community that we can reuse. The picture on the right is our bus. That was started 10 years ago by the community. We wanted an alternative to driving our cars everywhere. The roads are really challenging to ride bikes and walk on because of the curves and the mountainous aspects of them. And so a number of us got together and started the bus, got $5,000 from the community to buy an old school bus, and then got volunteer drivers. And from there, it kind of expanded. And now they've got a fleet of 3 to 4 buses, and they carry about 400 people per week. So that's a real success story. And it's now funded by the local government. Once they saw that it was a success, they decided to fund it. The picture down the bottom, we've got a heat pump program where a couple of Gabriolans decided to institute where they bought the heat pumps wholesale. They became a dealer, bought them wholesale, and then passed those savings on to Gabriola residents. So Gabriola residents receive the heat pump at the wholesale price. As a result, because the cost is almost half, then we have 1,000 heat pumps. That 1,000th heat pump was just sold last week, and that's in a community of 4,500 people. So we're probably the heat pump capital of Canada, is what I'm assuming. And I don't know, Cascadia. I would love to hear more about what's going on in those terms in other parts of Cascadia. So then what we did is we talked about the fact that we have these wicked problems. If it's transportation and climate change, what are those wicked problems? And then let's start to find solutions to those problems. So each table would have, and there are about 4 to 5 people at each table, and each table would have kind of one aspect of that wicked problem. So this particular scene is from the food event, and one table might have had kind of financial challenges for young farmers. And the 2 of the people sitting at this table are actually 2 of our young farmers, which really fit well with them being able to kind of look at these wicked problems and then come up with some solutions. There was lots of conversation, lots of debate with different ideas on the table, as you can well imagine. I don't know if this is the same as true with other communities that are represented on the Zoom call, but there's tons of opinions around. On Gabriola, you have one topic and there's so many opinions, it's lovely. So we also put sheets of paper on each table so that people could doodle, and when they were doing the solutions. So in addition to kind of having someone list what the solutions were, we also captured some beautiful stuff that people were suggesting. So our community bus is called Gertie. That's Gabriola's Environmentally Responsible Trans-Island Express. It's a 20-mile there and back on Gabriola. So someone suggested that when we had storms and flooding, that the Gertie buses have chainsaws and supplies and emergency supplies in them, ready in case something happens that other vehicles can't get around. We talked about housing, and we talked about sharing and some of the challenges, really, really horrible problems around affordable housing, very challenging for any young person to be able to buy on Gabriola. And I think that might be true. I'd like to hear again across Cascadia. To buy a piece of land, it's around $300,000. So the idea was, why don't we have a housing co-op set up on 5 acres, have a number of small little houses, tiny homes, and a central kind of common space. And I know that this has been done elsewhere, and part of it is around how do we do it on Gabriola, given the cost of land, and also given the challenges with our bylaws and our zoning. Okay, then the third, I got to actually put this aside. So one of the key things that was also coming through was this whole idea around neighborhoods. And I listened a bit to the session on earthquakes, and there was people were talking about neighborhoods being the source of a lot of kind of education together, mentoring. One of the actions going forward that we want to do is have those neighborhood groups be the place where people share tools, where they together come up with an emergency plan, so that they know where to go if there's an earthquake, they know where to go if there's a tsunami. And they also are the place where people learn how to garden together, how to farm together. If there's one place that doesn't have a good land, then they can share maybe a piece of land that someone else has that they could farm on. So we really saw the neighborhoods coming out very strongly in the solutions people were suggesting. Talked a lot about water. Joe had mentioned this in the very initial session, that on Gabriola, there's no water system. There's obviously no mountains. There's no lake. There's a tiny lake, but it's owned by someone who is not allowing it for community use. And so wells and collecting water and wells are the source of our water systems. And if you run out, many people on the island do not have, they can't access any water, groundwater, so they have to have cisterns, but they'll run out, and we'll end up with truckloads of water being shipped from Nanaimo across on the ferry over to Gabriola to fill up these cisterns. So we had a lot of conversation about how do we change both our use of water. To the right, with the beautiful, amazing design, it says what % have composting toilets. How do we switch so that 40% of our water isn't flushing down into our septic fields? And how do we increase the number of composting toilets and manage to do that around the bylaws that are in place? So those are some of the conversations that we ended up having around the solutions. And at each table, just to kind of as a basis so people would actually get a sense as to the issue of that each topic was representing. So this one is the fact sheet for local terrestrial ecosystems and climate change. And we included a lot of information, the global context, the latest IPCC report. We then talked about Gabriola specific. What were the issues on Gabriola? What was the temperature projected to be like as climate change becomes more extreme? We also offered potential opportunities for mitigation and adaptation. Our ecosystem, the trees are changing. What trees used to be able to survive here are dying. Some of them are dying. And so the question is, so how do we go forward recognizing what are the species that will survive here that are, Gary oak is one that will survive here, whereas cedars are actually slowly dying on the island. So those were some of the kind of conceptual pieces that people looked at. We then went on, we took tours, 4 tours that represented the 4 of the different topics. So the one down on the bottom left, that we did an eco tour system, and we looked at several different places. One was a walking tour through the Commons, which is a 26-acre piece of land that's situated right next to the kind of village area. And there's ecosystem mapping on that land, and they're looking at where there's signs of stress from climate change, and they're looking at all of the different kind of plants and what is coming up. They're looking at the pond. There's a pond on the property, and they've restored that pond. And so creatures are coming back. It's becoming much more alive again, which is quite exciting. The next one up, we took a tour of buildings on Gabriola that were a couple of the key points where they need to keep them small. Natural building materials was featured. There's one that was a passive solar house, so the cement floor and the windows on the one side. Another tour we went on was to some amazing food places, some amazing farms. So this, we took Brandon and Joe and Penny and so on this tour through Watercliff Farm, it was called. And he's just done an amazing job of combining how can he have a market garden on this property and at the same time really try and live by regeneration and permaculture principles. Then the final one tour we took, this was last in July, we went on a tour of rainwater systems, rainwater collection systems. So what's right at the very front of that are the filters that are used in one of the systems. And at the back, he's got about 4 cisterns. He can't access any water from the well. And so this is his whole water supply. We had an amazing session with some elders from Snoonamics, Indigenous Ways of Knowing. We had a big potluck, and they shared stories, and they shared how they live with the land, a different way of kind of being with the land than our Western culture, kind of, which is more an imposition on. And it was just a beautiful conversation as well. I think people left just with their hearts full. It was just quite lovely. We also had a session with the artists. So there was an art show where people provided their different art pieces. And the one on the left is, it's indigo dyed, natural. She grows the indigo plants herself, dyed it on fabric that had been around. It had been a panel from a Japanese screen. And it really is the roots of life and the tree of life. And you know, the idea that the clogging of our lungs does not bode well for the tree above and the leaves, and how can we ensure that our ground is just beautifully healthy for those lungs to be able to produce. Okay, then so after we finished the 11 different topics, our 12th one was about action. So what we did is we took all of the information that people had provided in those solutions brainstorming, and we posted it all around the wall of our agricultural center, and people would then walk around with, and I don't know how many of you have done dotocracy, but they basically had dots that they put on the things that they felt were the most important things for us to be moving forward on. And so out of that, there came a number of different actions that we are moving forward on. The neighborhoods is one of them. There's, first of all, going to be a mapping, because there are some neighborhoods that are very vibrant and already have kind of groups that gather together on a regular basis. They look after their neighbors, they look after the vulnerable population, they have plans for when disasters hit. But there are neighborhoods that are not cohesive. And so how do we start to build those and support those? We're looking at donut economics as one of the aspects of shifting our thinking about economy upside down. We've also got a group there that is talking about circular economy. So what other waste materials, so-called waste materials, are actually potentially useful to create things with. There's one initiative that's starting up that is using waste vegetable oil to in a waste vegetable oil burner that will then heat up a greenhouse in the two side seasons so that more food can be grown on Gabriola. On Gabriola, the estimate is that if the system shut down, then, and that includes the ferries, then we probably have 3 days worth of food for the people on the island. So one of the key things, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. One of the key things we need to be doing is really thinking about how do we grow more food and how do we support the farmers that are there. We have about 20 farmers on the island, 20 working farms, and how do we support others to grow where they are as well. Biking, I had mentioned the roads are really horrendous, and so there's a real work going on to try to ensure that we've got roads and paths for bikes and pedestrians. And on the island, there was a group called Shorekeepers, and they've kind of stopped working a bit. They're dormant, so to speak, and also stream keepers have stopped working a bit. The land stewards are going full steam ahead. So we're working at pulling together some of the people from those groups that had fallen for whatever reason by the wayside, and kind of bringing them back and working together. So a lot of these things, as you'll notice, are things that can be translated across all of the different communities in Cascadia. And what I think we would like to do is also hear from the other communities to hear what kinds of things can we kind of take a look at and see whether or not we can repeat here. So just to give you a sense as to what where this has been shared already, the regional district of Nanaimo, so that's the colorful piece down at the bottom. You can see how it's situated on Vancouver Island in the little insert. Gabriola is the little tiny one, it's number 7. And that is part of the regional district of Nanaimo. They provided us with a bit of funding to begin with. And then they realized they were trying to initiate a climate change initiative throughout the region, and discovered that very few of the other communities were taking them up on it. And so they wanted to find out what we were doing. And they're now going to incorporate some funding into the regional district budget so other communities can do what it is that we're doing. The other place that we shared was with the Islands Trust. The Islands Trust is our regional government. We have 2 governments. We have 2 local governments. The regional district of Nanaimo, we're unincorporated, part of that. And then the Islands Trust is the islands just north of the San Juan Islands up to Hornby and Quadra and so on. And so we presented, there's 26 elected officials, there's 2 elected on each island, and there's 13 groupings of islands. And so we presented to the 26 members of that council. And so many of them indicated that they'd like to support this same kind of initiative in their community, fitting it to their community, of course. Then we shared it at the regional economic, the Rural Island Economic Partnership Forum, which was held here on Gabriola. And they actually include islands all the way up to the northern tip of Vancouver Island, which includes Malcolm Island. And again, ridiculous because of what we know about watersheds. It doesn't go down below that that border, and so they were quite excited about what we were doing, and they actually had a resolution at the end of the forum which, and I'll read it, whereas collectively we will hold 12 events on each island to capture people's hearts and minds and to demonstrate and promote benefits of practical solutions to climate change. So we were quite thrilled that they actually took that on and are moving forward with that. Okay, I'm going to now open it up to questions, and I will close this out. Okay. So does anyone have any questions? Just sitting with it. So a question for you guys then. So if you, in your community, what kind of, what would you use from this particular initiative? Could you use this particular initiative? Would it make sense in your community? If so, what kinds of ways would you shift it or adjust it? No? Would anyone use this in their community? Yes, go for it.
So yes, it's super inspiring. I was particularly taken with the whole waste stream thing, the ripping up the polyester. And so the thing that I always come back to is the people piece. Yeah. Like, you know, we have the ways and means, and how do we engage the people? How do we include more, pull more people in? So can you speak to that at all?
I'm sure. I think that when one of the things with Gabriola is that it's probably a community that's ready a bit more. One of the things that Sustainable Gabriola had initiated probably 8 years previously was something called Gabriola Talks. And so people become engaged and also get used to the idea of having conversations that are civil, that are respectful, and that really are looking for solutions. So that's one aspect. The other thing is we have been hit really severely by some of the climate change stuff. The heat dome that I think you guys all felt as well. It reached temperatures here where people were, you know, not on Gabriola, but in nearby Nanaimo, people were dying. And we've had smoke from the wildfires where it's yellow, you can barely see. And I think that we engaged people in a way that they felt welcome. I think that was a big part of it, is that they felt like it didn't matter whether they were, you know, driving a car still, that you know, it didn't matter. The fact is everyone could become engaged. There was no criticism. Instead, what there was a real welcoming of how do we talk about these issues together. When we were thinking about the title, people loved the 12-12-12. I think it felt like it was an amount of time. They knew how many sessions there would be. We also thought through the idea that people learn in different ways. I had a number of people that never showed up to one cafe, but they diligently looked at each of those fact sheets and they used them in all of the work that they were doing. The woman doing the housing initiative on the island, she would use the information from that to change how they were doing their housing project. I think the fact that we had success stories, so we got people engaged because they were being asked to talk about their successes. And so then they started coming back each time. So same with the performers, they would invite their friends to come. And so it became something that everyone felt that they were part of. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
My question is, how in how how is the community bought into these ideas? Like, do you have very much pushback by members or naysayers or people that, how's engagement with these? They're all incredible.
Yeah, and to be really honest, I think knowing what can happen, that is always a potential, and yet there has been no naysayers. We would provide a summary of all the solutions people came up with in the local paper every week, and as anyone who has a local paper might know, that's often the place where people then will do the criticism and that can't happen and so on. And we didn't get one. We got a lot of people saying, wow, that's a great idea. And the fear this summer with the drought, the water thing was massive. People are seeing it and are being part of it, right? We didn't have rain for, was it 2.5 months, I think. So in a rainforest, yeah. So yeah, that's a good question because that's always a potential, isn't it? Yeah, and I think some of the ideas that we're now coming up with, there may be some pushback, I would guess, yeah. Someone else had their hand up? No? Yes, go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, I need to sit with this for a little while too. I live on Vashon Island,
Right.
and I'm really, and this was sort of a much less formulated idea came out of our discussion when Regenerate Cascadia came to visit. Though I'm not quite sure how to, I guess one question I have is what role do you play in the community and the people who initiated this?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So we are all, I'm just trying to think if we're all people who have decided to retire, somewhat to retire. We're all involved quite actively in different initiatives on the island. So the 4 of us that kind of said, yes, I'll do it, included myself, and I've been involved in setting up the bus and initiating the textile initiative. And I did my PhD on transformative change and based it on different activities. So this is my passion.
Right.
There's another member of our group who did his PhD on climate change, and he wrote a book called "The Brief History of the Earth's Weather," and it is so he's also passionate, and he's someone who doesn't have a car. He walks everywhere. He has a massive farm as well as I do. So we have been both working in the community for quite a while on a lot of these initiatives. And then we had a newcomer, the woman who was the wife of the man who wrote The Power of Stories. So she's a member of the Lakota First Nation, and she moved to Gabriola about 1.5 years ago, or 2 years ago now, I guess, and just really wanted to work with what we were doing. This is a passion of hers. So I guess this is part of the thing, is finding people who are passionate about it. And we deliberately do not do hierarchical. So it's we just all work together, and it was a really lovely group to work with because everyone did a lot of work, and we all kind of just participated. Came up with different cultural speakers, different success stories. So yeah.
There's a lot of people who kind of work together on Vashon Island in different ways. There are some really successful NGOs that are really community supported. The Land Trust just does amazing work on the island, and there's food access programs, network of farms. They all work really well, and our housing. Affordable housing organization that kind of works with the Land Trust, so there's not the conflicting competition for land or housing, and those are all kind of things that I've supported since I've been on the island and gotten involved with in different ways. And they actually do come together, and they also come together with artists and musicians on the island. But I think not, it sounds like this was really around a very cohesive set of issues, which I think having a focus for the conversations, but also there is an interest in connecting islands in the Salish Sea. And I really want to show this presentation to some of the people that I was talking to about these conversations, and show how they really developed, really created action and strategies, and brought people together. And I don't know, so I would really like to talk with you more about that. And I don't know if it actually involves maybe some exchange between Gabriola and Vashon Island.
That'd be great. Let's do that. Okay, and I think Brandon has already sent both of us the emails.
Yeah.
So let's do that connection and see what we can do as far as an exchange.
Right. And there are some other people that I can get involved, I think, in that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be great.
That'd be fun. Thank you. That's great. John, and then Guy. Yeah, John first.
Hi there. I'm calling from Oxfordshire in England.
Oh my. Okay.
Well, we're doing an Upper Thames Valley bioregion. I'm really curious about this discussion you just had with Sue about the connecting islands, because a lot of the area that we're in actually has lots of medieval villages going back to 13th, 14th century.
Right.
But they may as well be islands separated culturally, even though they're about 2 miles apart. It's quite extraordinary. So one of our main agendas is to render them more compatible, culturally compatible, even though they're so adjacent. One of the things that we've taken up to achieve that, to create a kind of common language, is donut economics.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're familiar with it. So Kate Raworth lives in Oxford, and she is regular to many of our meetings for this because it's her county. So the way in which we're approaching it, it's twofold. You've got donut economics, which there's a regular concern about the way in which it's deployed, because people kind of take it on as a badge, and it's a bit tokenistic. So you take on, you talk about inclusivity a lot, but nothing ever changes. So the other half of it that we're developing, it's not dissimilar to what you're talking about with this local economy issue. I mean, we've called it STEP, Strategic Economic Partnership for Oxfordshire, in which we bring together lots of local only commerce businesses and communities throughout the whole area via the lenses of the donut economics. When you were talking, it seems to me that it's not a dissimilar agenda to what you're seeking to achieve, and I think that's something of interest throughout the islands as well. That's quite intriguing to me. I lived up in Whistler for about a year, quite a while ago.
Oh yeah,
So
that's an island in its own way.
Yeah, I mean that's a kind of format that I'd be interested to see how to discuss with you further.
Well, let's do that. Because donut economics is something that we are looking at to. I think I mentioned that for the economic change way going forward, and looking at the lab online that Kate's got. There's some really good ways in which I think we can use donut economics. So I'd really love to have further conversation about how that could work as well. Yeah. That would be great. Okay. Good. Thank you, Guy.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Guy. I live in Nanaimo.
Oh, do you? Great.
Yeah, right. So just a quick question is, what is going on in Nanaimo? And to institute these type of changes. And to also let you know, I'm a member of the Proud Institute located in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay.
And under Proud theory, we emphasize heavily relocalized economics, which I think is similar to the donut economy you're talking about. But I would just like to find out what's happening here in NIMO and how I can be a part of instituting change here, as well as participating in what's going on in Gabriola or elsewhere. So
I believe there is a group. Have you bumped into Guy Dauncey?
I think I saw him a while back at our Eco Village when I used to live
Okay.
there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, he lives in Cedar or Yellow Point area now.
Mhm.
And I believe he's involved in a group in Nanaimo that are doing some work. We don't hear much about what they're doing. They did, there's some work going on around solar energy, I believe, and we had some conversations with them around doing some bulk buying and so on. But Guy Dauncey might be one of the first people I would connect with, and he's pretty easy to get in touch with. I think his email is everywhere.
Okay. All right.
He's part of something called BC CAN, I think it's called BC Climate Action Network. So that's one place, but he's around, so he might be one of the people to get in touch with.
Okay.
I do, yeah, and one of the things I find quite interesting, and it's interesting talking to some of these people from the other islands, is there's so many similarities between our issues on islands, and connecting with Nanaimo, there are some different issues, I think. So I think that's often what happens. Okay, so I've got Rose. You've got your hand up. Hi.
Hi there. Thank you for the work that you've done. And it was incredibly inspiring to see how you kind of coalesced all the different richness of the different projects. I live in Port Townsend, and even though we're not an island, we're kind of in similar situations. And I don't know if you've put it in the chat yet, how to reach out to you, because I would absolutely love to connect with you beyond, and also to see if your slideshow is, if you share that, because I know it would inform our community in a huge way as well.
Okay, so I'll put my email in here.
Great.
And the slideshow, I'm just trying to think of a good way to share it, because it's a very heavy one, so to speak. Like it's got lots of, it can't go through email. Brandon, is there some way that the slideshow that I could somehow get that shared with other people? Do you know?
That's a great, like the slideshow itself, not just a recording of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really nice idea. Maybe I think what I will do is, how about after this, we could create like a resource section, and then anybody can share their slides, and then I actually recommend other books and other things. And I actually think creating a little resource library of all the participants would be really wonderful.
And I use something, I'm a filmmaker, so I send heavy latent things, and there's something called WeTransfer, which is kind of a Dropbox, but it's free. So it's just WeTransfer, and you can upload your elements to that, but you have to tell people that the email is not going to come from you, but it will come from WeTransfer. So just, and so that they don't want to ignore it thinking that it's fluff or, just, but look up WeTransfer and you can send things in that regard.
Okay, WE transfer?
Correct.
Yeah, perfect,
So,
okay.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you, yeah. No, it's been great to hear other people's take on things too. So have I got anyone's hand up that I've missed?
I've got something to share just from Salt Spring, Faye.
Oh, great.
Here mostly because my partner's here, but I got to sit on the south end. There's a bunch of folks who were concerned about what would happen if the forest fires made it over to here. And so there was a local initiative for what do you do when fire comes to Salt Spring, and what kind of essentially civil defense is available, and we're talking about water, ensuring water and other stuff that comes with the apocalypse. So I'm imagining that you guys are doing, from what you're
Something similar.
describing, that as well.
Yes, exactly. And, not even the fire coming over from the mainland, but or from the Vancouver Island, but it could start on Gabriola too. And I'm sure same with Salt Spring, knowing Salt Spring, right? I mean, I think you've got lots of forested area there as well.
Yeah, people are pretty concerned.
Yeah, there is a very active group on Salt Spring, and I'm lost his name right now. Brian, is that his name?
Brian. Yeah, Brian, and there's another Brian, and a
Okay.
bunch of Brians.
Yeah, because and Brian had talked about, because he's part of the Rural Island Economic Forum conversations I've been having, and so he's been talking about finding out more about the Climate 12-12-12, so potentially he could have it on Salt Spring or something similar. Make sure it fits with Salt Spring though. Yeah. Guy, you've still got your hand up? You've got your hand up? Yeah.
Got to lower it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Any last questions? We're nearing the end. Penny. Oops, I can't hear you. Yeah. I can't hear you. Yeah.
Sorry, that's such a common Zoom.
Oh, I know.
Well, I'm wondering if we can get a recording of this presentation, because the slides are great, but without your story behind it, it doesn't mean a lot.
I think Brandon can answer that.
Yeah, I asked in the chat, I didn't get an answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been kind of actually speaking of recordings, I've been uploading all the recordings from yesterday to YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're just as soon as we're able to, and Zoom does its processing thing, we're just downloading it and then uploading it to YouTube. So everything will be available.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any final questions?
Yeah, so much appreciation to everybody and all the magic that's happening. Thank you, Faye, thank you, Brandon, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's so many amazing people in this area, isn't there? And it is about sharing. How do we do the sharing? Yeah. So we have 4 minutes left. I'd love to hear, just even like one person mentioned the textile initiative. That was what kind of grabbed them. Anyone else want to mention one particular thing? I'm curious. And you can not answer, and that way it'll get us right to 12 o'clock, lunchtime.
I can answer. How charming that you live on Gabriola. I've been there myself years ago, and on a tandem bike ride. And but it's compared to living in a city, it's just so sweet to think about the possibilities. I'm glad you're having so much success.
Yeah, it is fun, I have to say. I've lived in big cities before, in Victoria and Vancouver, and yeah, this is good people here. Yeah. Yeah.
So even some of the small details, like having the big paper on the tables of the meetings where people get, that's really valuable right there.
Oh yeah, we were talking actually about having an art show with some of those drawings too, because I mean there was one which was even a greenhouse with chickens at one end, creating the manure and the compost and growing at the other and switching them and so on. So yeah, the pictures were great, and people enjoy that. I think all of us like doodling, right? So yeah. Well, I want to say thank you to all of you. And I gather it's lunchtime next, is it not, Brandon? Oh, Brandon's might not be there.
I think it's lunch, but it looks like there's also presentations.
Yeah, so we got so it's both lunch, and so we're gonna actually use this room for the lunch, and we'll just have some breakout rooms, which I can open right now. And then yeah, actually we have Henning from Transition Lopez, and I think he wants to do like a lightning talk. So he's going to do that at 12. And then David Ketter and that'll be in the primary room. And then David Ketter will do a presentation on using a case study there in the Slocan Valley.
And thank you everyone for attending this.
Oh.
It's been really lovely meeting you, and I look forward to meeting many of you in many different ways, doing exchanges. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I leave, if it will be gone. No, Brandon, you're still there, right?
Yeah, I'll just hang out, and anybody else who wants to join is welcome to join.